everyone, I'm Philip. I am the solo developer of a RTS project inside of Godot, which I've been doing a lot of tutorials to cover the different gameplay needs we are going to get from Godot to be under our RTS project. And I wanted to cover and talk about something that I think is very important for us, that is possibly being reaching to us for the future here. So let's see what Godot has in store for us for the next versions. So I'm going to be talking with you about this presentation here, which was from GodotCon from 2023, which talked about the GDScript past, present, and future. And this is presented by Marques, which is the VNN username under GitHub, which is the main GDScript core developer. So let's start with the presentation, and I'm going to put a link below if you want to watch it on full detail. So we're going to focus on the future aspects of GDScript that they presented here. And specifically, we're going to be talking about the first one, which is the traits. So the first one is the trait system for GDScript, which is super important in my opinion, because it's going to allow us to do so much more inside GDScript, and it's going to optimize the way that we try to implement multiple tasks from different scripts inside a single one. So here you can see what it talks about. And it's something I mentioned when I initially have tried my ideas with modules. This proposal is very much important in my opinion for GDScript. It's going to provide a lot of benefits, and we can see that it's been mentioned a lot, this proposal, and it's already in the works. This is somewhat in the works as of now, and if possible this is going to be released under Godot 4.3.
And the first one is traits. It's something that I've been working on, maybe 4.3, maybe. It's essentially a mix between like the mixins and the interfaces. You can use these as purely as interfaces or protocols. Essentially just, oh, this class must adhere to these interfaces, must have these methods, for instance. But you can also like add code to those methods. So you can have like a default implementation, and you can share this between multiple codes without having to deal with actual inheritance or stuff like that.
So traits is something very important for me because it's going to allow us to do multiple inheritance inside of Godot as a built-in method. So if you've been following me, I have developed a system that I call modules, which basically is separated scripts with static functions that we can reference through other scripts, and we don't have issues with cycle dependency or other things. We can simply script inside other scripts whenever we want. And the secret to that has been just to use static functions, so I have autocompletion to work in my favor. With traits, the autocompletion is going to be bigger, and it's going to also report a lot of errors that my module system doesn't have at the moment. So I'm looking up for traits to improve my coding inside Godot by a long time. And now that it has been mentioned on the GodotCon, I think this is more likely going to be reached in our hands on future versions. And if possible, on 4.3, it will be already reached, as VNN has said.
Typed dictionary. We have already typed arrays, but there's a few issues with typed arrays that we are looking to correct and make sure that's like all polished before we add the typed dictionaries, because the same issue is going to happen with dictionaries. But I think we have like in a good path to finish that really soon.
So something else I'm going to mention here is that we have typed arrays. So you can type some array and give a specific type for it. And typed arrays is the same thing as statically typing your code, which in turn improves performance. So the idea with type dictionaries is to improve your structure by forcing a type for the dictionary values, and hopefully with that we're also going to get a boost in performance. So I'm a fan of static typing, so I'm very much in favor of typed variables. So I'm keeping an eye on this as well for typed dictionaries to see what they can do.
We have structs, which is being a proposal, a more recent proposal, and kind of an implementation as well. We have a lot to discuss about this, but it's something that's like happening. And there's something that I don't really want to promise, but there's a lot of proposals that have been super popular, and I figure we want to mention because we're going to discuss it. We're going to see if it's feasible, if it's possible, if it's something that makes sense to the language, because like adding things to the language is easy, but removing things to the language from the language is impossible. So abstract classes and functions is also a proposal that has been a lot of activity lately and might make sense. We want to investigate again, talk with the team and see if that's something that we can go forward with.
And the part where I also am interested and somewhat relates to the trait idea with multiple inheritance is the concept of abstract classes and functions, which might sound the same thing with trying to achieve multiple inheritance, but abstract classes will work with inheritance the same way you work when you do extend something. So the way that George Marques explained here, I think is going to help you understand it.
Yes, thank you for your amazing work. I was kind of interested, because one of the proposals that was more of a maybe was abstract classes and functions. And I was interested with the traits that seems to be kind of like interfaces. Like I would want to hear like how it kind of differs, you would say from an interface / abstract class, if it's kind of an in-between. So I would want to hear some kind of expansion on that a bit, how traits gonna end up working.
Sure. So the idea of abstract classes is just a class. It has some some stub functions that you have to implement when you inherit it, and it's kind of the same with traits. The difference is more like the relationship, because with a trait, you can essentially like add multiple traits to the same code and stuff like that. But when you inherit an abstract class, you're kind of fixed on only one thing that you have to do. If you look at the engine itself, there's a lot of classes that are abstract, and you might not worry about like the button. There's like a base button class that's not really something that you want to instantiate, but you want to make a derivation of that. And that's kind of the same use for other things. Maybe you have like a huge tree of things that are connected by inheritance, but they have like a base, and you don't want you to be a trait. You really want you to be part of the inheritance tree, but you don't want anyone to instantiate that, or you want to force like the inheritance to actually implement these methods. And that's kind of how you use this as opposed of traits.
Next thing I want to talk about is intermediate representation format for GDScript. So this addresses another issue raised by the community, which is very well known. One of the issues we have with Godot scripts is that it is exposed as plain text under the project of the released game with all of the code for your game. So one of the things that the community wants is to obfuscate somewhat GDScript coding, and this is a proposal that is going to address that. And Vinan also mentioned on the same presentation that this would also be in the works.
We want to make the code like run faster. We want to take less time running code and improving the VM performance. It's one thing that we have in mind all the time, and we want to investigate ahead of time compilation and GIT compilation, just-in-time compilation. And just a quick brief if you're not aware, ahead of time compilation just means we take your script and like in the editor we just compile it to a binary code, to directly machine code that just can run. Exactly. So like when you export, you just create a machine code and you run. You just like as fast as it can be, because just run directly into the processor. Or just-in-time compilation is kind of like that, but instead of doing like in the editor, you do at runtime. So when you load the script, you compile it to machine code, and then you can run on the current machine that's running. And we are looking to proposals that would improve this performance in some other ways. Like you can use allow VM as a backend, which is used by a lot of languages out there, so it's a very established thing. We can also use transpile to C code, or maybe C++, and use the existing compiler for C. And that would make the code essentially is the same as ahead of time compilation, but instead of compiling directly, you just compile to C and then ask the C compiler to optimize everything, and we have only do half of the job. Or using WebAssembly, which on web we can just like use the browser itself, but we can also include a runtime for other platforms. There's also something that has been proposed, and everything is just something that they want to look into and do research and search what's feasible, what's the best option for us. This idea of an intermediate representation kind of clashes a little bit with other things, but the idea is just instead of using GDScript right now is just the source code. So you just load the source code and then you compile and then you store that until you need to run it. And my idea is to just do this compilation part beforehand and save this in a format that can be stored in the disk. So you can store that like in the PCK during export, and then at the release when you load the script, there's no script anymore. There's just this code that can be really fastly converted to bytecode and then run on the VM. That improves not only the loading times, which can be a bit complicated with like big scripts and big interdependencies between scripts, but also like some people has been asking for obfuscation of the code, and that allows you to not start like the plain source code into the final release of your game.
So the byproduct of this implementation is that it's going to obfuscate the code, but the main benefit from this proposal, it is requesting more optimizations and more performance to our code. So this is very relevant for developers that want to obfuscate the GDScript code on future releases for their projects. And there's a lot of reasons you might want to do that, and you can see that the community is pretty much active on this topic as well. It's very important. So the main ideas to obfuscate GDScript, it also relies on code performance, because one of the ways they talked about to optimize this is to convert the code to bytes. And there's a lot of talking to converting this to machine code and other things, but this is also very much relevant for a lot of developers that are taking Godot seriously and want to make a lot of bigger projects, and they want to protect their source code. Now, of course, this is not foolproof. They recommend you to use DRMs, and you can see here that this discussion is not about that. So if you want maximum obfuscation of your code, you should use DRM or encryption. I personally don't think we need a super tight obfuscation method. We just need something that doesn't allow you to edit the source code directly from release projects. I think that's a negative, in my opinion. But having said that, this proposal here is very much well active to this day. So you can see there's a lot of people engaging on this. Vinet also mentioned this a couple of times in the past. So hopefully by the sheer size of the community participating on this issue and the interest around it, we can hopefully see a solution coming for Godot on this aspect as well, which is something you also should keep in mind for future releases of Godot. So this is all that I wanted to talk about in this video, and I'll see you on the next one.